Picture this moment. Your phone buzzes with its 17th notification of the morning. The news feeds scroll past with their endless cascade of uncertainty, conflict, and change. Your calendar overflows with obligations you never quite remember. Agreeing to? Your mind races between 1,000 different futures, most of them tinged with worry. This is 2025. This is anxiety in its most refined form. The simple fears our ancestors faced when survival was uncertain. But the complex, layered dread of a hyper-connected world where every tragedy, every opinion, every possibility demands our immediate attention and emotional investment. You are not alone in this feeling. Millions wake each day to the same digital avalanche, the same sense that life is happening to them rather than through them. We have built a world of infinite possibility and immediate gratification, yet somehow we find ourselves more restless, more fragmented, more anxious than perhaps any generation before us. The very technologies designed to connect us have left us feeling isolated in our own minds, prisoners of our own thoughts, slaves to the next notification, the next crisis, the next thing we must worry about but cannot control. But what if I told you that nearly 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor sat in his tent on the Germanic frontier, facing plagues, wars, and the crushing weight of an empire on his shoulders, and found a way to achieve something we desperately seek today? What if I told you that a crippled slave in ancient Rome developed practices that could free you from the tyranny of your own anxious thoughts? What if I told you that a wealthy Roman advisor, banished to a remote island, discovered daily rituals that could transform your relationship with uncertainty itself? These men were Stoics, and they left us something more valuable than gold or power. They left us a practical philosophy of inner freedom, a set of daily practices that can guide us from the chaos of anxiety to the calm strength of equanimity. Not the false peace of denial or escape, but the deep, unshakable tranquility that comes from knowing exactly what is within your control and what is not, and acting accordingly. The word Stoic has been misunderstood in our modern age. We think it means emotionless, cold, unfeeling. But the original Stoics were not trying to eliminate emotion, they were trying to achieve something far more sophisticated. They sought ataraxia, a state of serene calmness, and apatheia, freedom from destructive passions. They wanted to live with what they called equanimity, a balanced mind that could face both triumph and disaster with the same steady heart. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal that we now call Meditations, never intended his thoughts to be published. He was simply a man trying to make sense of existence, practicing what he called the discipline of desire, the discipline of action, and the discipline of assent. These were not abstract philosophical concepts, but practical daily exercises. Mental training regimens as rigorous as any physical workout, designed to strengthen the mind's capacity for wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. Seneca, the wealthy advisor who knew both the heights of Roman society and the depths of exile, wrote letters to his friend Lucilius that read like a masterclass in applied philosophy. He understood that philosophy was not an academic exercise, but a way of life, a daily practice of examining one's thoughts, preparing for challenges, and cultivating inner resilience. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, he wrote, understanding that change is the only constant, and our relationship to that change determines our peace of mind. Epictetus, born into slavery and freed to become one of history's greatest teachers, knew something about powerlessness that few philosophers ever experience. Yet from this apparent disadvantage came his most profound insight. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. His teachings, recorded by his student Arian as the Discourses, offer us the most practical guidance for daily living that philosophy has ever produced. These three men lived in different circumstances, faced different challenges, yet they discovered the same fundamental truth. Happiness and peace are not dependent on external conditions, but on how we choose to think about and respond to those conditions. They developed daily practices, rituals that trained the mind like a muscle, that prepared them for whatever life might bring. Now, In 2025, as we face challenges they could never have imagined, the constant stimulation of digital media, the overwhelming pace of technological change, the isolation that comes with virtual connection, their ancient wisdom has never been more relevant. The human mind, after all, has not evolved significantly in 2 millennia. We still struggle with the same fundamental challenges: how to find meaning in uncertainty, how to act with courage in the face of fear, how to maintain our values when the world seems chaotic. The first ritual they practiced, and the one that can transform your entire day, begins the moment you open your eyes, instead of immediately reaching for your phone. Instead of letting the external world rush into your consciousness like a flood, the Stoics began each day with what we might call the morning reflection. This is not meditation in the Eastern sense, though it shares some qualities. This is active philosophical preparation, a mental rehearsal for the day ahead. Marcus Aurelius would begin his day by reminding himself of certain truths. He would say to himself, "Today I will meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." But rather than approaching this with dread, he continued, "They are all due to the offender's ignorance of what is. Good or evil, none of them can hurt me." This was not pessimism, but preparation. By anticipating challenges, he was training his mind to respond from a place of philosophical strength rather than emotional reactivity. Imagine beginning your own day this way, before checking your messages, before consuming the news, before letting the world tell you how to feel. You take 5 minutes to center yourself in Stoic truth. You remind yourself that today you will encounter things you cannot control: other people's moods, expected events, technology failures, traffic, whether political developments. But you also remind yourself of what you can control: your thoughts, your responses, your choices, your character. You might say to yourself, "Today I will focus on what is up to me. I will act with virtue regardless of how others act. I will remember that my peace of mind depends not on what happens to me, but on how I choose to interpret and respond to what happens to me." This simple practice, done consistently, begins to rewire your neural pathways away from reactive anxiety and toward responsive wisdom. The second ritual the Stoics practiced might seem counterintuitive to our comfort-seeking age, but it holds profound power for building mental resilience. They called it various names, but we might call it voluntary discomfort. Seneca would periodically dress in poor clothes and eat simple food, not out of asceticism, but as a form of mental training. He wanted to prove to himself that he could be happy with less, that his peace of mind was not dependent on luxury or comfort. In our age of infinite convenience, this practice becomes even more valuable. We have become so accustomed to immediate gratification, to having our every need anticipated and met, that the slightest discomfort feels like a crisis. The Stoics understood that this psychological fragility was a form of slavery. We become dependent on external conditions for our internal state. The practice of voluntary discomfort in 2025 might look like this. Once a week, you might choose to walk instead of driving, to eat a simple meal instead of ordering delivery, to sit with your thoughts instead of immediately reaching for entertainment. You might choose to experience cold, heat, hunger, or boredom without immediately seeking relief. Not as punishment, but as training. Picture yourself on a cold morning, choosing to walk outside without immediately seeking warmth. As your body experiences the discomfort, your mind learns something profound. This sensation, while unpleasant, cannot actually harm you. You are stronger than you realized. You are more resilient than you knew. When real difficulties arise, job loss, relationship challenges, health issues, you will have already trained your mind to know that discomfort is temporary and survivable. Marcus Aurelius practiced this regularly, choosing to sleep on hard ground when he could have slept in luxury, choosing to face hardship when he could have avoided it, wrote. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate associates you. This was not passive resignation, but active acceptance, a deliberate choice to find strength in difficulty rather than happiness in ease. The third ritual might initially seem morbid to modern sensibilities, but it represents one of the most powerful psychological tools ever developed: negative visualization, or what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. This is not worry or catastrophizing, which project anxiety into an imagined future, but is a deliberate, philosophical exercise designed to increase gratitude for what you have and prepare your mind for what might be lost. Seneca would regularly imagine losing his wealth, his position, his health, even his life. But he did this not to become depressed or fearful, but to realize how much he had to be grateful for in the present moment and to prepare himself mentally for the inevitable changes that life brings. He understood that attachment to things beyond our control is the root of suffering, and that by regularly contemplating loss, we can reduce our psychological dependence on external goods. In practice, this might involve spending a few minutes each day imagining life without something you currently take for granted. You might imagine your home destroyed, your job lost, your health compromised, your relationships ended. But you approach this exercise with a specific purpose: to realize that your happiness and peace of mind need not depend on any of these external conditions. You are training your mind to find contentment in virtue itself, in the quality of your character, in your capacity to respond to whatever life brings with wisdom and grace. This practice transforms your relationship with uncertainty. Instead of anxiously avoiding thoughts of potential loss, you regularly confront them in a controlled philosophical context. When change actually comes, as it inevitably will, your mind has already processed the possibility and found peace. With it, you have already discovered that your deepest self, your capacity for wisdom and virtue, cannot be taken from you by any external circumstance. Modern psychology has discovered that this practice, which they call hedonic adaptation prevention, actually increases life satisfaction and reduces anxiety. By regularly contemplating the temporary nature of our current conditions, we become more grateful for them while they last and more prepared to let them go when they change. The fourth ritual addresses one of the most challenging aspects of modern life: the constant stream of choices, information, and demands that assault our attention every moment of every day. The Stoics developed what we might call the sacred pause, though they knew it by different names. This is the practice of creating space between stimulus and response, of inserting a moment of philosophical reflection before acting or reacting. Epictetus taught that we cannot control our initial impressions, the thoughts and emotions that arise automatically in response to events, but we can control what we do with those impressions. We can examine them, question them, choose whether to give them our assent. This tiny gap between experience and response is where freedom lives, where we can choose to act from wisdom rather than impulse. In 2025, this practice might be the most crucial skill you can develop. When your phone buzzes with a notification, instead of immediately checking it, you pause. You ask yourself, is this urgent or merely immediate? Will responding now serve my highest values or merely satisfy my compulsions? When someone says something that triggers anger, instead of immediately reacting, you pause. You ask yourself, what would responding with virtue look like in this situation? How can I act in accordance with my principles rather than my emotions? This pause need not be long even. A single conscious breath can be enough to shift from reactive mode to responsive mode. But it must be deliberate, a conscious choice to engage your philosophical training before engaging with the world. Time, this practice develops what we might call philosophical reflexes, automatic habits of pausing and choosing rather than simply reacting. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The sacred pause is how we exercise this power, moment by moment, choice by choice, until responding from wisdom becomes as natural as breathing. The fifth ritual brings each day to a close with the same intentional reflection with which it began. The Stoics practiced what Seneca called the evening review, a daily examination of conscience that served both as a form of moral inventory and as preparation for better living tomorrow. This is not self-flagellation or harsh self-judgment, but gentle, honest assessment guided by philosophical principles. Seneca would end each day by reviewing his actions, thoughts, and responses. He would ask himself, what wounds did I heal today? What failing did I resist? Where can I show improvement? He approached this not as a judge condemning a criminal, but as a doctor examining a patient, looking for signs of health in areas that need attention. In your own evening review, you might ask yourself similar questions adapted to your circumstances and challenges. Did I act in accordance with my values today? When I faced difficulty, did I respond with virtue or react from emotion? I learn about myself and about life. How can I improve tomorrow? You might reflect on moments when you succeeded in applying Stoic principles and moments when you fell short, treating both as opportunities for learning and growth. This practice serves multiple purposes. It reinforces the lessons of the day, helping you integrate philosophical insights into practical wisdom. It prepares your mind for sleep by processing the day's events through a philosophical lens, rather than letting them churn anxiously in your subconscious. And it plants seeds for tomorrow, setting intentions and commitments that will guide your actions when you wake. The sixth, and perhaps most transformative ritual, is what we might call the practice of present attention, though the Stoics understood it as living in accordance with nature. This is the discipline of keeping your mind focused on the present moment and the present task, rather than letting it scatter across past regrets and future worries. It is the antidote to the fragmented attention that characterizes modern life. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to focus on the present. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me. This practice involves training your attention like a spotlight, learning to direct it consciously rather than letting it be pulled by every distraction. When you are eating, you eat fully, tasting your food, feeling grateful for nourishment. When you are walking, you walk with attention to your steps, your breath, your surroundings. When you are listening to someone speak, you listen with your whole being, not mentally composing your response or checking your phone. In our hyper-connected age, this kind of attention feels revolutionary. We have become accustomed to partial attention, to multitasking, to the constant background hum of digital stimulation. But the Stoics understood that divided attention leads to a divided life, that we cannot find peace or meaning when our minds are constantly scattered. The practice of present attention also involves accepting what the Stoics called preferred indifference, things that we might prefer to have or not have, but which do not determine our fundamental well-being. Health is preferable to sickness, wealth to poverty, reputation to disgrace. But none of these things can make us virtuous or vicious, happy or miserable, unless we choose to let them. This acceptance is not passive resignation, but active engagement with reality as it is, rather than as we wish it were. When you are stuck in traffic, instead of fuming about the delay, you practice accepting what is while doing what you can. When someone cancels plans, instead of taking it personally, you practice seeing it as an opportunity for solitude or alternative activities. When technology fails, instead of raging against the inconvenience, you practice finding patience and adaptability. These 6 rituals, morning reflection, voluntary discomfort, negative visualization, the sacred pause, evening review, and present attention, form a comprehensive daily practice that can gradually transform your relationship with anxiety, uncertainty, and the challenges of modern life. They are not quick fixes or magic bullets, but rather consistent practices that slowly build psychological strength and wisdom. The transformation they offer is not dramatic or immediate. You will not wake up tomorrow free from anxiety or worry. But if you commit to these practices, if you approach them with the same consistency you might bring to physical exercise, you will begin to notice subtle changes. You will find yourself less reactive to stressful situations, more able to pause and choose your response. You'll discover a growing sense of inner stability that does not depend on external circumstances. You will begin to experience what the Stoics called ataraxia, deep peace, that comes not from the absence of challenges, but from the presence of wisdom in facing them. You will find yourself less dependent on others' approval, less devastated by setbacks, less anxious about the future. Not because you have become cold or unfeeling, but because you have learned to distinguish between what you can control and what you cannot, and to focus your energy on what is truly up to you. The ancient Stoics faced plagues, wars, exile, persecution, and death. They dealt with difficult people, political upheaval, economic uncertainty, and personal loss. Yet they found ways to live with dignity, courage, and peace. They discovered that external circumstances, no matter how challenging, could not touch the deepest part of themselves, their capacity to choose their response, to act with virtue, to find meaning in the midst of chaos. You live in a different world, but you face the same fundamental human challenges. You encounter difficult people, uncertain circumstances, loss, change, and the constant pressure to be someone other than who you are. The specific details may be different. The essential situation is the same. You are a human being trying to live well in a world you cannot fully control. The Stoic practices offer you the same tools that served Marcus Aurelius in his tent, Seneca in his exile, and Epictetus in his chains. They offer you a way to find strength in difficulty, peace in chaos, and meaning in uncertainty. They invite you to become not a passive victim of circumstances, but an active agent of your own. Flourishing, as you begin to integrate these practices into your daily life, remember that the goal is not perfection, but progress. The Stoics called this prakoptha, gradual advancement toward wisdom and virtue. Some days you will remember to pause before reacting. Other days you will find yourself caught in old patterns of anxiety and reactivity. Both are part of the journey. What matters is not that you never fail, but that you always return to the practice. Start small. Choose one ritual that resonates with you and commit to practicing it for a week. Perhaps begin each morning with a few minutes of reflection, reminding yourself of what is and is not within your control. Or end each day with a brief review, asking yourself what you learned and how you can improve tomorrow. As one practice becomes natural, add another. Remember that these are not just mental exercises, but ways of training yourself for actual living. The morning reflection prepares you for the day's challenges. The evening review helps you learn from experience. The practice of voluntary discomfort builds resilience for unavoidable hardship. Negative visualization increases gratitude and reduces attachment. The sacred pause creates space for wisdom. Present attention brings you fully into your own life. Over time, these practices will begin to change not just how you think, but how you perceive, how you feel, and how you act. You'll find yourself naturally responding to difficulty with curiosity, rather than panic, to uncertainty with acceptance, rather than anxiety, to challenge with courage, rather than fear. You will discover that you are stronger than you knew, more resilient than you imagined, more capable of wisdom and virtue than you had dared to hope. The path from anxiety to equanimity is not a destination you reach, but a direction you travel. Every moment offers you the opportunity to choose wisdom over worry, courage over comfort, virtue over vice. Every challenge becomes a chance to practice, every difficulty an opportunity to grow, every setback a stepping stone toward greater wisdom. The Stoics believe that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, that we are connected not just to other human beings, but to the rational structure of the universe itself. Marcus Aurelius called this the logos, the underlying reason and order that guides all things. When we align ourselves with this larger purpose, when we choose to act with virtue regardless of circumstances, we participate in something eternal and meaningful. This is perhaps the deepest gift of Stoic practice, the recognition that your individual life, with all its challenges and struggles, is part of a larger story of human flourishing. Your choice to respond to difficulty with wisdom, to treat others with justice, to act with courage in the face of fear, to practice self-discipline in a culture of excess. These choices matter not just for you, but for everyone whose life you touch. As you close your eyes tonight and prepare for sleep, as you wake tomorrow and face another day, remember that you carry within you the capacity for equanimity. You have the power to choose your response to whatever life brings. You can train your mind, strengthen your character, and find peace in the midst of chaos. The ancient wisdom of the Stoics is not trapped in dusty books or lost to history. It lives in every moment when you choose patience over frustration, acceptance over resistance, wisdom over reactivity. It lives in your decision to focus on what you can control rather than worry about what you cannot. It lives in your commitment to virtue, your practice of present attention, your cultivation of inner strength. Take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the ground, your body in space, your mind capable of choice. You are not a victim of circumstances, but a practitioner of philosophy, a student of wisdom, a human being capable of finding peace in any situation. The rituals await you. The practices call to you. The path from anxiety to equanimity stretches before you, not as a distant destination, but as a way of walking. Moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath, into the fullness of your own life. The Stoics would say that you already have everything you need. The capacity for wisdom lives within you. The power to choose your response belongs to you. The opportunity to practice virtue presents itself in every moment.
What will
you choose? How will you respond? Ancient philosophers have shown you the way. Now the walking is up to you.